If you guys know anything about me, you know that the number one thing that gets under my skin is paying for parking. I don't think that we should pay for parking, especially when our tax money goes toward maintaining streets. Why are we then going to get taxed again to park our cars on those streets?
Preach it, sister.
So
teach it.
Chicago is one of the cities that has decided to privatize their parking meters.
Disaster.
And this has been a disaster because for the fourth straight year in a row, these private companies have increased the cost of parking on their streets. So just to give you an
course,
you guys saw this coming. We've talked about this before, but just to give you a sense of how expensive it will be, on-street metered parking rates will increase in 2013 to $2 per hour for 82% of the city, right? Which doesn't sound too bad, but it gets worse.
Now, if you're in a major city, $2 an hour is something that you're used to, like Los Angeles, New York, etc., right? But hold, gets much worse.
Much worse. $4 per hour near downtown and $6.50 per hour in the downtown area.
No, but wait. Yeah, this is a parking meter. It's not a parking garage, okay? $6.50. And I remember thinking like, man, maybe I'm old school, but I remember the days when you used to put a quarter in, right?
Yes.
It turns out I'm not old school. In Chicago, it was just 4 years ago when it cost a quarter. Now, why did it go from a quarter to $6.50 in some areas? Because they privatized the meters. And when they privatize it, the corporation thinks, wait a minute, let me get this right. I already paid for this. They paid lump sum in the beginning, right? And I get the state to enforce it for me. It's not even their workers, it's state workers that go write the tickets, and they have an incentive because they're going to get more money out of writing the tickets. What would stop me from charging it as high as humanly possible?
Yeah, so there are no limits. I mean, they get to choose. And also keep in mind that a lot of these people don't have a choice. You got to park your car somewhere, right?
And if you work around there and your job's been there for the last 4 years, the last 40 years, well, what are you going to do? You got to go work there. And look, so you might have an arrangement with a private parking garage, etc. And at some point, competition will enter in to the realm here, because if they charge $20 an hour, you might walk, or you might take the bus, or you might put it in a garage. It says, so there are other factors, right? But overall, they're not the government. They're not there to look out for you. They're there to make as much money from you as possible, even though, in the words of President Obama, they didn't build that, right? They didn't build a road, they didn't build a parking area, they didn't build a parking meter. At some point, they made a deal with a politician who had run out of money because they did whatever they did, right? Giving tax cuts to the rich and corporations probably before, and then they go, oh, I need a little short-term money, and then you give it to them, and then they screw you for till the end of time.
So unsurprisingly, Matt Taibbi wrote an excellent piece on this situation, and New York is doing the exact same thing, and it's going to be absolutely disastrous. And as Cenk indicated previously, the reason why politicians are doing this is because of the fact that they are experiencing huge budget shortfalls. Like, they don't know what to do. They need to find a way to close the gap.
And in New York, God forbid, Mayor Bloomberg should raise taxes on Wall Street. He would never, ever do that, right? So what's he going to do? He's going to raise taxes on you. Because as Anna pointed out in the beginning, this is a form of a tax, right?
Yes, it is a form of the tax. And of course, it's regressive taxation, because the people who shouldn't be taxed at all, the middle class, right, ends up paying for these huge tax cuts for the wealthy. So just to tell you how much the private company exploits the city, for the next 75 years, Chicago will have this situation. It's in contract, it's in writing, okay? So that's disastrous.
75 years.
Yes, but in the next 75 years, this was a potential $5 billion industry for the city. But because this private company took over, and because Chicago was desperate for cash up front, they sold this real estate to the private company for $1.5 billion.
Oh, great, fantastic.
Yes, so it's pennies on the dime.
Yeah. I mean, they buy it for $1.5 billion. It's worth at least $5 billion, but that's before they cranked it up to ungodly amounts. So I don't know how much it's worth now. I mean, it started out as $5 billion, but they got $1.5 billion in cash up front. Now it could be worth a hell of a lot more, depending on how much they can squeeze out of you. And as Anna made the best point here, it's a regressive tax. It shifts the burden onto you guys, onto all of us who park. And so that's $6.50 an hour. If it's a Wall Street guy, is nothing for him, right? Because, yeah, everybody pays it, but it's a tiny, tiny percentage of his income. Now, if you would actually increase the taxes on his income, that would be a big amount, right? For him, this is basically nothing. But for the rest of us, it's a lot to pay $6.50 an hour in the places you got to go. And sometimes you got to go downtown where there's courtrooms.
All the time.
Right?
Yes, I know all about that.
Right,
Yeah.
and then when
for
you go
parking citations.
For parking.
Everybody calm down.
And then when you go to deal with parking citations, you get more parking citations. Not only do you have to pay the $6.50, but sometimes you screw up and you don't get back in time, and boom, you get another $75 ticket, and the list goes on and on. The vicious cycle goes on and on. And by the way, one other thing that's important to this. If you have a private loan that you cannot pay, a private bill that you cannot pay, you can't put you in prison for that. I mean, they chase you and hound you forever with the debt collectors. But if you owe the government, and you get a ticket, for example, for not paying that parking meter, you owe the government. They can arrest you for that. And this is how they also, in a sense, begin debtors' prisons again for the benefit of private corporations, but using government power to put us in jail if we don't pay them.